Hello, happy Friday, and welcome to the show. Yes, another OWASP top 10 is in the building. We have some security badges to hand out. NVIDIA seals a $700 million run AI seed funding. Uh, and there's
That
some
is
spectrum datum
correct.
leaks, right?
Yeah.
There's a ton.
He is Mike. I continue to be Steve. Welcome to Wired In.
Yeah, 10 articles, 10 breakdowns from yours truly, typically on Fridays, but not all the time. So make sure you hit that little bell, subscribe, so you get us before happy hour on Friday.
Hell yeah. It's always 5 o'clock somewhere, though. Shall we dive into our first hot topic?
Let's do it. I feel like we're doing one of these every 3 months.
Yeah. Non-human identity OWASP top 10. Because, as you say, it had been 3 months since we'd had a new top 10. It reminds me of when I went to OWASP Global last year, and my ex-colleague Matt Johnson and I asked the OWASP board of directors one by one, how many top 10s are there? 0 people got it right. But this is a good one. Non-human identity OWASP top 10. I figure there's more non-human identities than actual human identities these days. I mean, seriously, if you're in Kubernetes and you're one of those people, every blob that's talking anything, any service account, that's a non-human identity.
Yeah, way too many
And
secrets and service accounts.
you got it. And we can play it pretty fast and loose with that. And we do. I'm just going to take a quick glance and click through to see, because I haven't even looked to see why do we need it? What's different?
So
And
I think when I was reading through, I think there were a few things. One, the ranking criteria. I really like the way they did this. They pick 4 things, and it's threat agents, exploitability, security weakness prevalence, security weakness detectability, and then the impact. Exactly. And they score it like that. And it's relatively easy to understand. And so you can see something like improper offboarding, high
yeah,
impact, very easy to miss. Maybe focus like all of your security teams on this first, right? So if you're developing, if you're a CISO and you're going to go through and evaluate this, you probably want to focus on that. If you don't have proper offboarding, fix that first, right? So, and again,
yeah.
detectability is hard because you as a company, you don't know when everybody leaves necessarily. And if one person slips through the crack and they bring their social media password and admin with them and it doesn't get changed, who knows, right? So, again, high impact, low detectability. They do a really good job. I like them.
Pardon me. All right. Sorry, just furball.
Yeah. Yeah, secret leakage. Human use of NHIs was there as well. I think we'll get into that
Yeah,
later in the show,
yeah,
which is
good.
going to be pretty important. But yeah, there's just too many secrets out there. CI/CD pipelines and long-lived secrets, right? Secrets that last for a year. Now everybody's moving to 15 minutes. I can't log into anything on my phone without having to re-sign into stuff. So now you know why.
It's all a giant pain, but necessary for security.
Yep.
All right.
Speaking of, well, I can't say giant pain. This one actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, Biden administration launches cybersecurity executive order. This is a follow-up to the 2021 update with NIST. So
Yeah,
I want to say we talked about that 3 years ago on this show
we did,
when
for
we were
sure.
in our infancy. And basically, the United States is coming in and saying the software supply chain practices that they outlined in the NIST guideline 2021, you're going to have to validate all of that stuff if you're going to become a supplier for the US government. Now, this is partially on the heels of SolarWinds. Also, on the Treasury getting hacked a few weeks ago, we reported on that. Apparently, Janet Yellen's own computer was hacked. So,
Yeah,
yeah, this is going to be very important. Very interesting that people say it's not clear if President-elect Donald Trump's new administration will uphold the executive order. Cybersecurity tends to be a very nonpartisan issue.
yeah,
And the
that's
one
true.
thing Trump hasn't announced is he hasn't announced a cyber team. So I do have a feeling that he's just going to keep everybody in place. Um, I just don't think cybersecurity is his specialty. He'll probably be like, "Yeah, what's going on is completely fine."
He's not just going to put one of his buddies in charge.
I don't think that's going to happen. No. But please, please let me be right about this one.
Well,
Please.
the part 2 to this that we were debating whether we should do it in its own right was this cyber mark that's going to come, the cyber trust crest that's going to go onto essentially IoT devices accepting phones.
Mhm.
Interesting, like a safety mark that, but
Yeah.
how do you prove that?
Yeah, so all IoT devices, and I think the they'll not ship anything, or the government will not buy anything in 2027 unless it has this mark. And my guess is that the assembly process has to be validated by somebody in the U.S. government, right? So if you're building very, very cheap manufactured cameras in China, we don't know if you installed some extra processor that is then reaching out to China, and they're like, no, no, we need to know exactly every single step to create that motherboard, to create that IoT device that's not doing that. Um,
Yeah, possibly, probably another follow-on from the software bill of materials concept, right? Except now a hardware bill of materials as well.
and so with all the chip manufacturing they're doing in the US, it's gonna be pretty important because you're gonna buy chips in the US, you're gonna assemble in the US, you're gonna get certified. So I think it's also a security play and a manufacturing in the US play.
All right.
Yeah.
Let us, this is probably the weirdest thing. You added this.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought, so this is, Dieselgate, but for trains. For those who are watching at home, Dieselgate was when, Volkswagen
Mm,
was messing with software during their emissions testing and artificially lowering their emissions reports to be able to sell into the US and other markets.
that was huge.
Dieselgate's similar. It happened in Poland. Basically, the Polish supplier of trains created all these software, and they were contracted to fix it. But after they supplied the trains, the Polish government also contracted other third parties to fix the trains. And so what was happening is after the trains were fixed, they would break down. They'd break down like
Mm,
10 days later, 20 days later, a certain amount of time. And so then they had to hire a Polish hacking group to reverse engineer the software. And by the way,
yeah,
when
that's
they reached
brutal.
out to the software developers, they were just quiet ghosts. Nobody commented. And then when they reached out and reverse engineered it, they realized that the original developers put code in there that made it so if you shut down the train for longer than 10 days at a location that was not the original provider, the train would break down later. So it was like
That's hilarious, right? Like
a timed breakdown. Yeah.
and marked areas for service, right?
Yep. So as long as it was serviced in the green area, it was good. If it was serviced in the red area, it would break down 10 days later. So it's an ongoing legal battle, but it's a good case for ethical hacking and specifically why you need that talent. Um,
Yeah.
Also, when one company owns a monopoly on the software, you better have some big reassurances.
It kind of reminded me a little bit. I don't think it's still the case, but if you opened your iPhone or you did something to your iPhone, it could tell and it was unhappy with you. This is maybe like 5, 6 years ago, but it was like a DRM example, like this one for the repairs on iPhones. It didn't like if you
Mhm.
replace the screen, it wasn't the original screen. It was like
Yep.
it would void your
Yeah,
warranty or whatever.
all the Apple third-party vendors were really upset about that. There's been multiple lawsuits. I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about. Yeah.
yeah. It's like it's crazy. So it's similar, but a little bit like what?
Mhm, and I think governments are going to, wake up to this, and they're gonna have to put reassurances and say, "Okay, this is the code that's on the train. I need that specific code. Who's gonna maintain it? Who's gonna update it?" It's a whole separate supply chain. So it's the
Yeah.
train and the software now.
Yep. Enforced maintenance.
Yeah.
Alrighty. This one's freaking complicated. Do you want to go first or shall I go first?
You put this in. I thought it was really cool.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so there was a this is a follow on from, let's see if he mentions his own original. He does. Okay. Yeah, back in last year. He wrote a blog. I think we even had the blog on the show last year covering GitHub Action's cache poisoning. It was like conceptual, saying that the cache exists in GitHub Action runners. And there was a concept of even being able to predict and poison the cache. And so he created it says rough proof of concept, but I mean, it's a little bit more than rough. It's pretty good. And he goes through exactly how it works, how he essentially has a tar file you can see here, where he extracts, retains paths, and overwrites parts of the cache. And he even has this element down here, which is about cache prediction,
Mhm.
cache entry replacement, cache prediction, active cache prediction. And it's it's very, I don't know how much more I want to get into it, but
You
it's
should try it out on
long.
one of our, pipelines. I mean, it embeds itself in the cache hits, and once it's poisoned, even if you try to redo the cache, it just replicates itself into the cache again.
Yeah. It's super awesome. Like this came to my attention because of a GitHub researcher, the GitHub Actions researcher that I know in Montreal. He like put this to my attention. He said, check this out. Like, how much time does this guy have? It must be his job too. But it's pretty awesome and very real. So I don't think enough attention often gets paid to these kinds of vulnerabilities or attack vectors. It's fascinating. Check it out. We haven't said it yet. All the links are down below, so you can go experiment on your own.
Yeah, you got it. It is pretty cool. As a project, I think he has to have initial access to the pipeline though to install it, right?
That's true. This is a follow-on from there's half a dozen CI/CD OWASP top 10. You want to learn how to get access to a pipeline, go check out yet another OWASP top 10. But if you do happen to use any of those OG methods of getting access, you can retain persistence via this method. It's very cool.
Mm-hmm. All right, onto a big acquisition in the AI space. NVIDIA seals a $700 million Run AI acquisition after antitrust approval by both the EU and the US. So even though they have 80% of the market share and they're probably going to gain more by snapping this Israeli company up, we're good.
Is that exactly the official call was?
Like, nah.
Come on, we like you.
I think
a cool CEO.
I think there's a few reasons why the government is leaving them alone. I think that there's a race right now and they don't want to get in the way. But then after they get too much, you'll see parts get broken up later. Seems to be the US way of letting the American companies grow and grow and grow and then hit them with antitrust 12 years later. They're going after everybody right now, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's one strategy. I mean, when you look at it, it makes a lot of sense. You design the chips and then now you're going to buy the software to make the chips more efficient, and you're going to tailor that software to your chips, right?
Yeah.
So the sales team must be through the roof with this one.
Oh, it's a no-brainer.
You bought the chips, here's the software that makes everything way more efficient on these chips.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah. I actually, 700 million seems like a big price tag. I think it's a bargain.
Yeah.
Like they got them before it was going to be billions.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Good work, NVIDIA.
They're one of only a few companies that can buy them too.
Yeah.
On to some important OSS updates. This was a kind of WTF. I think I was supposed to hit the button there, but we'll just make this as like a general update.
All right.
Licensing changes. Everyone loves some controversy.
Yeah. Well, this reminded me of HashiCorp changing their licensing. Elastic ages ago getting ticked off with Amazon and changing their licensing. It's a real crack at the fact that a lot of other vendors other than SemGrep use SemGrep and use the rules. And it was a pretty fast and loose open source license around your ability to use that. And I saw this through a LinkedIn post where somebody was basically just trashing them for doing this.
Wow.
They were very unhappy with the fact they did this, and they were talking about how you can get around it, and it's not going to change anything, and all it is a cry about how many other competitors are using their work, which it kind of is.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of likes on that post from people I know who work for the competitors that use SemGrep.
Oh, I'm sure the engineering team that's been forking this for a long time is very upset. Yeah. So the rule license restricting their use to internal, non-competing, and non-software as a service context.
Yeah.
So you can use it to build your own tools internally, but that's about it.
Yeah, you can't bake it into something you're selling. And it's like tons of people were doing it. Honestly, I think when I was doing application security with Chekhov, and we were like, oh, and if we could like add SAST to Chekhov. And we looked at SemGrep, we're like, nah, it's too complicated. But now I'm like, Jesus, I'm super happy we didn't do that because that would have backfired now.
Yeah. Do you think this licensing change is, so I think one, you want to knock out competition, but two, it does open you up to lawsuits against your competition, right? If they don't make those changes. So you're kind of like, hey, we see our competition doing this. We'll slow you down. Now here you have to go change your code for a while. And then we can kind of gain speed, right? So it's a little bit be very aware when you're incorporating open source software into your product.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to get into open source software third-party usage, but I would have advice on that, but that's for another day.
Exactly. Crazy stuff. Snyk in some controversy.
Yeah. This whole article, did you see this or did you see this when I added it?
I saw it when you added it.
Okay, yeah, it hit like 1, 2, 3. There was 3 articles back to back. One was the original Paul McCarty put his own blog out. I thought the registers link was a little bit better summary because it came a little later. But he was the one who found it. He's got like a bot that goes and looks at new editions, and
Okay.
he saw that there were some cursor libraries that had been added to npm called cursor retrieval, always local, shadow workspace, and he was like, and then he was like, well, why did it come from Snyk? And then he looked at the owner of the account. It was a Snyk email address. It was legit because you can't spoof the owner address.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just like, what the? And he's like, does Cursor know this? So he told Cursor, and it turned into this big kerfuffle about it. Well, go ahead.
Yep. Yeah. They'd never contacted Snyk for anything. The Snyk acknowledged it was an issue and stated they were investigating, which is never a good sign.
Well, and then something I don't have here, which you can find on your own just by Googling this as a follow-up. Snyk released an article on their own site saying, yeah, we did that. It was one of our researchers was just checking to see if dependency confusion attacks were viable against Cursor. And I went, yeah, that's what we did. Like there wasn't my bad. It was just nothing. And everybody's like, you can't do that. You can't not tell Cursor.
Yeah,
because
they're supposed to reach out and say, hey, we need you to test our product. And
yeah, well, the problem was
acting.
You can test dependency confusion, right, by putting a fully functional dependency in there. And if it gets downloaded, all it does is to a central server somewhere. You know it worked, no harm done. Their plugins had actual exfiltration of environment variables.
Yep. Yeah.
They were proper, real written malicious plugins. I'm like, you don't have to do that for research to know it works.
This feels like a half truth. Yeah, this feels like a half truth. It's like, yeah, we'll investigate. Yeah, we found this. No more investigation. It's like, it's not a full one.
Yeah, just okay. All right, so we start with a pretty big WTF there.
Yeah. Now we're on to one that's a little more crazy. Just don't buy Bitcoin from random people. Not even Bitcoin, some random
Bitcoin.
crap coins.
It's Solano-Fi.
Yeah.
Duh.
Yep. Yeah. So, U.S. Department of Justice is going after a pastor who used his position to influence over 1,500 people to buy a coin. It led to, I believe, it's almost $6 million.
Yeah,
that's how many people invest in this. Also, I think it's crazy that you're listening to your pastor for investment advice on a crypto exchange.
Well, let's break this down just a little bit, and controversially, you're listening to somebody, you're a religious person if you're listening to your pastor. So you're already believing all sorts of stuff this guy's telling you.
True. Not a big leap there.
So I mean, it's well, a pastor taking advantage of his
the new money
influence,
laundering scheme. It's a new pyramid scheme, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stay away. Don't buy random courses from Twitter people. Don't invest in scammy crypto exchanges. Stay away from all.
I know. It's funny you say random courses from internet people. I'm constantly thinking, what random course can I make that I can
be careful.
Put all over Instagram?
Just read his book first, and then you can decide if you want to buy his course. All right. Kubernetes outage, Proton wide outage caused by Kubernetes migration, software change. That's what Proton Mail. They have a ton of products. So they were migrating to Kubernetes. They were able to get most of their applications up quickly enough, but Proton Mail and Proton Calendar were the last ones to be brought online. So they took a while. Very curious to see how that happened, like how all of the products went out when you're doing a migration, because you would have thought you'd have a load balancer, you'd slowly bring one on, and then you check to make sure that's good. Like they just moved everything over at one time.
Yeah, that's there's a state. We have enough extra capacity to handle all the connections, ongoing migration, which required running 2 parallel infrastructures at the same time. Made it impossible to balance the load. Really?
Interesting.
That's kind of it's kind of a table stakes for a Kubernetes upgrade. Like if you can't upgrade Kubernetes safely, you just got to put more infrastructure in place. That's part of the
Yeah, and it
cost
doesn't
of
seem like it's a Kubernetes
business.
issue. It seems like it's a load balancer out in front of the two infrastructure issue, right? And then maybe there was some sort of
Yep.
timeout that was happening or authentication that was going awry, but yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
WTF. All right. This is our
Final
final
one,
one.
and we're ending on a high note here.
Yeah, this only crossed my path today, so it's pretty hot. This is a report by, let's be clear, Harmonic Security. If you're wondering, they monitored the use of organizations of AI inside an organization. So, like every organization you can imagine, yours, Red Hat, us, me, we use AI for tons of stuff. You mentioned something you use. What was it?
Yeah, it's
Arcane?
just monitors your Chrome usage and then creates little demos based off of what you've clicked on, right? And so it seems like it's just some
Yeah.
sort of web monitoring application that also is built in with whatever software that they're building into the corporations, right? And then monitoring to say, hey, Mike just used ChatGPT 100 times. Here are the stuff that he was putting in, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah, and that's a fair
yeah.
statement for corporate laptops, right? And they specialize in AI, so Copilots, ChatGPTs, Gemini. So Copilot's included, which is actually really handy, right? And they watch what people are doing, and their key findings are alarming. Just the was it 63.8%, going right to the bottom, of ChatGPT users use the free tier because they don't have a corporate usage, but they're going to use it anyway. 53.5% of sensitive
So
prompts
it sounds
entered
like the
into it.
power users know how to use AI a little bit better than the free tier users. If right, free tier users are
Yeah.
like, oh, let me just put this email, this sensitive email, and get a summary, and they do that a few times. They're like, oh, this is kind of cool. Then they go back to their work.
Yep. I can't believe these numbers are so high. I mean, I could see the code numbers. That could be a problem because if you're using a Copilot and you're doing, let's just say, beta testing, you've not even checked it into GitHub, you're worried about checking your sensitive data into GitHub, right? You're not even thinking that for test purposes, you hard coded
Hmm.
some keys into your code. And then you're going to delete them and make them an environment variable or something in a vault later. But it's like that Copilot still sees it.
Yep.
So it's there. So I think I could totally see why coders are making this mistake. But I'm like, legal and finance? What are you guys doing?
Excel tables and spreadsheets. I think they're like posting stuff in and asking for outputs, and then asking for
Oh, yeah.
the way to get them. I could see that.
That makes sense. Like Gemini, if you have corporate Gemini, it can
Yeah.
see all of your Google Sheets. Yep. There you go. Yeah, it's pretty alarming, and actually it's not a very long report. So link down below. Go check it out. It's I think, well, I mean, I've never heard of Harmonic Security, but I think it's a great report for them because that's what
Yep.
they protect you against.
Yep. And all the
Nice
corporate
work.
CEOs are looking at that and going, "Oh my gosh, people are doing what at home?"
Yeah. Well, yeah, just to get, I mean, this is anonymized, obviously, but I mean, just I think organizations would want to know like how many people. It's not even shadow AI. It's like that sounds like you're doing AI internally and using LLMs where you don't know where they're going to be. But this is just straight up admitting the fact that everyone is using ChatGPT or Gemini or
Yeah, and they don't really
something.
know the context of the information they're using. They're not able to accurately evaluate
No.
if what they're posting is a security breach or not.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I've done
this is
my
a new
AI training.
battleground.
I'm ready for
Interesting.
2025. Thanks. I know. And the
Woo!
social media training too. Don't worry. I'm all brought up to speed. I know.
Very, very corporate of you. Alrighty, that is the end of our show. All the links are down below. 10 articles, 10 breakdowns, all the wildest news in the cybersecurity, cloud native, and technological
Yep.
world.
He's Steve. I'm still Mike. And thanks for joining Wired In.